Just a quick heads up before we start this podcast. It's a little bit sweary. If you're listening in the car and you've got kids in, you might just want to pick another one from the Strategy Sessions back catalogue and come back to this one when you're on your own. There you go. Chloë Davies, what one thing do you wish you'd have known 10 years ago?
That it doesn't matter. And by that I mean what other people think or feel. Like, it doesn't matter. All that matters is what I think and what I feel. I think, especially as a woman and as a Black woman and as a Black working woman and a mum who's been working since I was 14. So we're approaching my third decade of working. That I was always conditioned to value other people's opinion. As a child of Africa, my mum's Nigerian. I was always like what my elders thought about me. And I think about 10 years ago, as I got to my 30s, I just, if I knew then what I know now, which is it just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. What you think, what you feel, how you hold your own mirror is how you should navigate your life. And so I think then the confidence that I have now, 10 years ago, I would have reached my bucket list goal of retiring by 40.
Oh, gee. Well, look, you're talking to somebody who was a self-confessed people pleaser for a good 20 years. Well, not 20 years of my working life. And it's only, as I've got sort of into my 40s and through, and lots of things have happened, that I'm much more an Andy Jarvis pleaser now,
Yep.
which to some ears sounds really selfish, but I don't think it is selfish. I spent so long trying to please and entertain everybody else that it took a little bit of time to work out that the one person who wasn't happy in that whole situation was this one.
Yeah.
So the big answer is fuck that. All right.
Yeah.
I'm going to do the things that make me happy. Now, luckily, they make other people happy sometimes along the way. I'm not talking about being a complete narcissist and being a lunatic, but trying to make me happy is much more important these days, and I'm pleased I've discovered that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like us to reframe it, because it's not about being a people pleaser. I like, for me it's come from the culture. For me it's come from, I've got African American parents. That is my heritage. So from my whole life, and especially being as a girl and the eldest and the first daughter, first grandchild, there is a weight of expectation that's put on you. But like, I laugh with my cousins and my friends and my family. Like, I knew how to be a house girl at 5. Like, you do your chores, when your elders come over, you go and you serve them first. I loved hanging out in the kitchen. No wonder my trade role as a chef. But that was what you were taught to do. You were taught to, go and get your uncle a plate. So that then became that you wanted to do a good job. So for me, it's more about culture pleasing rather than people pleasing. But if you've also grown up in a family that all education was key, for most, I'm just going to do this from a Black African perspective. Education is key. The fact that I work in the creative industry, God rest my granddad's soul, but you want to be a creative rather than an accountant or an engineer, you're not my granddaughter, and I've got such high expectations for you. So again, culture pleaser, you're coming into this like you just want to do. So, I've known from a young age, got to be the best. Like, I remember I got 97% on a maths test. And my granddad was like, "What is this?" I was like, "I got 97." He was like, "You didn't get 100?" I loved my grandma. My grandma was one of my best friends. But that's what I grew up with. So when you go into the world of work, but also when you start in retail, like my big job, I started in music, but working in music is very different to working in retail. Then you want to do the best that you can do. You want to be the best that you can be. And so you go over and above to achieve those goals. But to other people, it looks like you're a suck up or teacher's pet. So again, that pleasing part just travels with you your whole life. And I think that's one of the big things that I just had to break my own cycle and just go, not my circus, not my monkey, fuck that, I'm not doing it anymore.
Similar experience. My granny's part of the Windrush generation. I mean, she's dead now, God bless her. But so she migrated from Dominica to the UK. Subsequently, went on to live in Canada. And I went to university. So her children didn't go to university. A couple of her grandchildren did, and I went to be a PE teacher. That's what I wanted to be. I did maybe the first year of university. I was like, this is not for me. I taught in some schools. I did what I thought it was going to be is not
I was
what
about to say, like,
I was
hi,
like.
Mr. Jarvis. It doesn't quite.
And do you know what? There were bits of being in a school that I really loved. Being in a
Mhm.
staff room was just
Yeah,
utterly terrifying. And as someone who kind of would work that room fairly well, I was
yeah.
like, I do not want to spend my life in here being that. It just wasn't for me. I remember telling my granny when I left university, she was like, so have you got a school lined up? I was like, nah, I'm going to go into the marketing. And she was like,
What?
what? And I get it, right? Like she moved over in the no dogs, no blacks, no Irish times, right? And no one gave her any credibility. She was a cleaner. My granddad knocked things down. He dug holes in roads. They did jobs. They were spat at in the streets. They did all these things to give their kids a better life. Their kids came from the Caribbean. My dad, my uncle, my aunt did slightly better jobs than them. My uncle became a mechanic, worked for Ford for years, and was respectable enough. Played professional sport, and then her grandkids get a chance to become proper professions. I've got a cousin in the police. I was going to be a teacher. It was the respectability that nobody ever offered them. And I got down to uni and went, no chance. I don't want to do that. I want to do this cool thing. And she didn't get it. She just didn't get it.
But we have to give them grace because that's all they knew, right? When they
Yeah.
anything that was creative was kind of seen as like blasphemy from where they came from. My grandparents came in the same time, a little bit before Windrush, on a boat from Sierra Leone. My granddad was an accountant. My grandma was a midwife. At the times, again, no blacks, no dogs, no Irish. My grandparents weren't allowed to own a home. My granddad had to get his white counterpart. He gave him the money for his house. He bought the house. Then, when they had my dad, they were only allowed to have one child in the house. So, when my uncle was born, he wasn't actually allowed to live in the house that they owned. For 3 years, he lived in London, and he didn't actually come to live with them all as a family of four until he was 3. So, I think for them, like, the respect and value to them was aligned in having a proper job, having a real credible job that paid the bills, that was consistent. And that's all that they knew. Trying to explain working in Adland with my granddad is, probably for as same as your granny. And I can see his chuckle and his smirk now because he knew and he understood, but he's really, really old school. And, they lived to a certain time, and I wouldn't say stuck in their ways. Let's just say stubborn. Like, they knew a different world, but also that's their way, and that's their prerogative to be able to do that.
And I think as first generation migrants, stubbornness is a quality that you need,
Woo!
right? I mean, like in spades, right? The Americans talk about rugged individualism, which, if you trace it back, comes from settlers. Because listen, if you didn't do all the shit yourself, you died. That was it, right? If you couldn't build, you couldn't plant, you died. And our grandparents came over when, if they weren't stubborn, if they just didn't have that streak running through them, they'd have turned around and gone straight back. They'd have gone, what is this grim, overcast grey place where everyone hates us?
I just think they wouldn't have survived. Like, they wouldn't have been able to get back, because for many it was a one-way trip. Like, there was no
Mhm.
return. And it was come and assimilate. I think, what they each did within their own rights, their own way, was that they carved a piece of their own world, their own land, their own independence in what they had known from where they came from back home to the UK. And I wouldn't say that they assimilated, but they became part of the community. That, the where we are in the world right now, and it's like, keep a nation a certain color, but the nation was never fully this color. Like when we go back to the wars, when we go back to how this land was built in the first place, like love or hate, and I don't particularly like monarchy, but love or hate it, like this, we are not new. We didn't just get here and it wasn't just one shade, it was all shades of all nations, all creeds, all colors. We can see ourselves in history, time immemorial. So people trying to rechange a narrative of the world and where we're currently at, I'm literally like, okay, so how you gonna eat? How, who's gonna help you do all these trade roles? Who's feeding you? Like, make this shit make sense. And I think it's that part. It's like we could our when we didn't look like everybody else, our ancestors could have made a similar choice, and they chose not to. They chose to become one with the community, with where they were at. And I think that's all any of us have ever wanted to do, is just to be in and amongst community. It's when people are going, you don't belong, and I'm like, yeah, boo, but neither do you, because we are all immigrants. So
I mean, listen, the history of Britain, the history of the United Kingdom, right, is just a history of migration. I mean, there's nothing. This is the problem. You can't have rational arguments with people who are irrational. But the country's called Great Britain. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but people are like, oh, we're great. We're putting the Great in Britain. I was like, but no, it's because the French came and they already had a little, Britannia. So we were so it was just the Great Britain. It's just the big Britain, and there's the little one over there. It's a French term. No, it's because we're Great Britain. It's not really, is it though? It's a geographical term because you're a fucking idiot, and I just get so. I
this is the thing. I'm going to go back to culture for a second. This is the thing that I'm so pleased about in my culture, was that for my whole life it was embedded into me to know where I came from, to know my history, to really understand how I navigate the world, but always that to be a child of learning, like to always want to be a scholar, and so that none of us are ever finished. And so whether it's in my own craft, whether it's things now with my children, like to always be learned. I don't like to be like, for someone to call me dumb. Like, I just, for me, being smart, being book smart, is something to be incredibly proud about. And that's the thing that is so lost, is like, especially with this big bad internet, where education is at your fingertips. Like, you could learn any, even with ChatGPT, if you don't know how to look for it properly, you can ask something and have it come to you. Like, it's never been so easy to educate and teach yourselves, and yet people would
and
like
yet.
to continue to be dumb. They would like to continue to chat shit and not facts. And I'm like, wow. Okay, guys.
Well, look, the tagline of this podcast was developed by a guy called Azim Ahmed. I don't think he knew he was doing it. He just put a post up on LinkedIn. Somebody asked him for some podcast recommendations, and he said, "Oh, the strategy sessions, because it makes you think differently," which honestly was the nicest thing anything's ever said about me ever. So Azim, thank you. So I took the line and incorporated it in. So if you look at the logo, it says strategy sessions makes you think differently. I did try and copyright it a little bit. I was like, can I polish it? Do I make people think? Do I help people think differently? I was like, do you know what? Let's just stick with it as it was. It's fine. Which genuinely was one of the proudest days when I opened LinkedIn and saw that. I was like, yeah, that's what it's about. Conversations, about discussions, about challenging what we think. This is something we should be proud of. This is what we're trying to do. So, yeah, hopefully let's have a conversation that people can learn from over the next half hour, 40 minutes or so.
Absolutely. Let's get into it.
Hey up and welcome to the Strategy Sessions. My name is Andy Jarvis. I am the host of the show, and I want to thank you for coming along with me today. The person I was just talking to there is Chloë Davies, and we'll be back with Chloë in a minute to hear the rest of her amazing interview. This might well be the most important interview I've ever done on the strategy sessions. What Chloë talks about and the problems that we have as an advertising and marketing industry are real and they're happening now. So I find it really interesting to get her perspective on that. Before we get back to the interview, I want to ask for a couple of bits of help from you. Firstly, if you're a long-time listener, you will know I say talk to your customers quite a lot. What I'm doing now is I'm trying to get some research to go backing up the problem, as I see it, that marketers don't talk to their customers often enough. Now, if you look in the show notes, which will be around wherever you're listening or watching, there's a link that will take you through to a survey. I would love it if you could fill this survey in for me. It takes 2 to 3 minutes and is open until the end of October 2025. So if you're listening after that, just ignore the next 15 seconds. So please do take the link, fill it in. Doesn't take very long. And the second ask I would say is, could you share it with any marketing networks that you're in? That could be the team who you're sitting with. It could be a Slack channel. It could be a WhatsApp group. It could be anything. Please do share it far and wide. And the third thing is fill it in, even if you haven't spoken to a customer in years. That's important to capture too. My final ask before we get back to Chloë is, if you've enjoyed the show, would you tell somebody? Would you tell a friend? Would you share it with someone? And my final ask, feels like a document name that you've been working on a long time, is, can you leave a review? If it's on YouTube, just leave a little comment. If you're on Spotify, give it a 5-star review. And on Apple, leave a comment. That would be a massive help. Really does help more people discover the show. Right. Thanks for your time. I'm going to shut up and we'll get back to Chloë Davies. Chloë, we are, what are we now, 15 minutes into a marketing podcast, and I haven't even asked you,
I know.
tell us about you. You're the founder and CEO. It's like, who are you and why are you on the podcast? The founder and CEO of It Takes a Village Collective.
Oh my gosh. It Takes a Village Collective has been in my brain for maybe about 8-9 years. It was called many different things, but finally launched it as It Takes a Village, or ITAV, in 2023. And at its core, we are a community and a global hub for Black women in Adland, advertising, media, marketing, and comms, for us to come together, for us to share learning, for us to find solidarity with each other. But we have one mission, and that is by 2028, 1 in 5 professionals in the collective industries will be Black women. If we break down the industry and perhaps look at it through a media or an entertainment lens, we are overskewed. We're there in abundance. The same as we look at it in from a PR or perhaps comms at a junior to mid-level. But when we did the flip to advertising and marketing, the demographic got much, much smaller. And especially when we look at it from a senior leadership perspective, I can do it in a couple of hands. Like, we're not there. So it was really about how we find a universal average, because we're there and we're in abundance, and from agency to agency, there's no uniformity, and we don't all have to be the same, but it's like I can go from one agency and be an account director, and in the next agency I can go and I'm an account partner. And for me, the language is different, but the job is not the same. But actually, that's how to become the same. So yeah, for us, it's about having those conversations. And I think what I the initial idea that I started it on, and the reality of where we're at now has probably shifted a lot. We've done so much in the last 2 years. We've launched the We Can't All Be Lying open survey, which looks at these experiences. And we said, look, we're going to do this research study for the next 3 years, and gather that information from Black women. It's not an easy survey. It takes about 30 to 45 minutes because this data doesn't exist. So, when they're asking, when they're talking about our community, they don't have anything to go from. They just give us an example of elsewhere. And I think lots of this all just came from, my own history. I said before, I've been working now for almost, over 30 years now. I started in music. My mum was the first Black department manager for John Lewis Partnership. She worked at Peter Jones in Sloane Square. I started when I was 16, became a manager by the age of 17. So I'm the youngest manager in John Lewis history at that age. And when you had that level of responsibility, I stayed with John Lewis for 10 years. I ended up going and helping open the Trafford Centre store, and then had a dual site role with Trafford and Cheadle, helped open Cardiff and a few other stores, like, had a real breadth, and had always worked with clients, always learned, like, launched new brands, worked in fashion, had been client side for, 20, 25 years, worked within the LGBT community. And then 4 years ago, a very good friend of mine said, "You should. I'm working with this agency. They've got this brand new role. You should go for it." And I was like, "I don't want to go and work for anybody else right now. No disrespect to the agency. I just want to take a break. I've got two deliciously nourished, spicy boys, and I wanted to focus on them and getting my eldest into a specialist school. The system's very broken, so that's what I wanted to do. But I ended up going for this role, and it was the first head of social impact at Lucky Generals, who are the creative agency for people on a mission. And for 2 years, I got to change the world. I got to change the world alongside a brilliant agency with one living room, two doors, as they say, for London and New York, and be across every single client campaign, whether it was light touch or from start to finish. We really did some stuff, and to every single person that I got to work with, it was the experience of a lifetime. But also in that, navigating it as, at the time, one of the most senior black women in the industry, and a dark skinned black woman. The rules are different, and so it didn't always reflect the experience that I wanted to have. And so we got to a point where my values didn't align with my agency, and I made the decision to part ways, and really invest in what I wanted to do, which was to always be in community to do this. Because the question that I kept asking myself is, as senior as I am, if this is as hard as it is for me right now, then what the hell is happening to everybody else? And why, at least if we aren't talking about it, why aren't we doing something about it? And the only way we're going to be able to do anything is to do this together. So that's really like the origin. If I wasn't booked and busy enough for ITAV alongside that. And for a while they ran in parallel, but alongside that was Simply Miss Chloe, which is the social impact consultation side of our business, which in essence is me and some really great people that I work alongside. And that's been work that I've done for a very, very, very long time across industries, looking at, how do we how do we lift the hood of where you're at and put the engine back together and make sure that every single part is cleaned and and working. And we do that through an L&D function. So yeah, I've done that for, obviously, doing it for Lucky's, but worked with Kinesso, worked with TMW, Pablo, like, some really, really great agencies, worked on some really, really great bodies of work, but then, also did it in the finance sector and, insurance. So, yeah, I do many, many things, but it was about, how do we actually get to the root? How do we fix where we're at, and how does the whole tree get to grow, and we don't have to cut off the limbs? I know I'm going all analogy, but I think that for me, it was really it, that everyone wants to like shear and cut off, and I was like, no, we just need to give it some vitamins and give it some water, and it will come back.
What I want to do is just dive into the work you did at Lucky Generals just for a couple of minutes, and then kind of take from their work back into the social impact and into ITAV. You mentioned a great phrase. You said, "I was changing the world for a little bit,"
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I can see from what you've got on LinkedIn and a few other things, you work with some fairly major brands to be able to help them transform, but use social impact in a way that maybe resonates with business,
Mm-hmm.
with their business objective. So I think the first question is, what's the tension with sort of running social impact but doing it on a kind of commercial basis? Is there a tension with that, or is that just how you get businesses to listen?
Not attention, it's an understanding. Now, and language is power, right? So it's based on an understanding of our industry in perhaps where other industries have already been having this conversation. I'll give you an example, like DEI, EDI, IND, like depending on where you're at, it's called different things. In our industry, now we're talking about transformation and growth and transformation. But for me, social impact is safeguarding. It's about making sure that every single piece comes together and thinking about safeguarding the team, safeguarding the work, safeguarding the clients. How do we make sure that is all running? So in essence, that is, what I did. We call it social impact, but for me, it was safeguarding and making sure how could we make every part of the business work together to be a transformative force. So at Lucky's, my role was four pillars. Like I just said, how we built a truly inclusive culture for London and New York. So into the three founders alongside the London and the New York MD. I did the exact same thing across our entire client footprint. So it may have been one client wanted inclusion. Look, how do they build inclusive comms? Or it may be like for Virgin Atlantic, I'm on the account from start to finish and really in the nitty gritty driving the campaign. Or it might be that I'm the last line of defense. So I always joked I'm the one that checks everybody's homework. So at the end, it might be that the creators might come and chat to me about something. But before it got that last sign off to DBT, our creative founder, it came to me. We had a look. Are there any watch outs? Are there anything that we kind of need to go back to the drawing board before it gets presented and then it gets created and put into the world? And then lastly, how to be best in class in the industry, how to be that, thought leader, that person that was being able to bring maybe a part of community that we'd never been able to reach before because of all the places that I showed up outside in community. So if I put that into practice for you, one of the phrases that you use for your tagline for the podcast, but for Virgin Atlantic, we created the platform See the World Differently. And this was really for a, massive brand that was so iconic that hadn't said anything to the world for 8 years and were coming back and were very people focused. How did they create this campaign for the first time to say something? Also in a, post-COVID world where perhaps as a brand, the conversations weren't necessarily in alignment with who they are and who they'd always been. Segue, it's my mum's favourite airline. I used to travel Virgin Nigeria on a regular basis. And my godbrother he ran the upper class desk at Heathrow. So personally, it aligned with me. And for us and at Lucky's, it was really about how could I help empower the team to pull out the heart of that brand through this campaign. And tell a story about what it means to fly Virgin Atlantic. And so that was what we did. Matt Sims, who was the business director, and he was an absolute godsend and such an incredible talent. We pulled in the Diversity Standards Collective, and we, with a fine tooth comb, went over everything from helping the client rewrite policy, looking at what does their ethos look like, getting their ERGs involved, like cast, crew, working with Ed and Lewis, the brilliant CDs on it. And, how do I make them comfortable if there are perhaps terminologies or communities that they don't actually know? I remember we did like a LGBT 101 session because that just wasn't their lived experience. And, I wasn't a dickhead about it. It was how can I empower them to be the best that they could possibly be? And it was a beautiful, beautiful advert. But what I mean when I say it changed the world is it changed the world. Runway on a Runway changed an archaic policy that looked at uniform and changed the aviation industry, but also looked at how we look at it in the marketing industry. And, their biggest competitor, British Airways, changed their own uniform policy straight away. So it's about that part. It's about not what's the commercial value, because if you're doing it for the commercial value, you're gonna trip over your own feet and you're gonna get it wrong. It's about at the root, at the core of where the work is made. How are we all in alignment, and how is my client involved in that? How is my team involved in that? How is the work involved in that? The commercial element is just the icing on the cake, because if you get it right inside, then the ripple effect is everything else. And so that's what I mean. For 2 years, the ripple effect touched everything, regardless of whatever client it was that was going through those doors, that ethos, that way of life, and they've continued to go on and do that, means that the work is commercially viable, the work is successful, awarding all the things that you want, but it's because they did the work inside.
So with that, you're so far embedded in the organization that I'm assuming by the sounds of it, it kind of nobody really knew where the agency started and the company stopped, right? It feels like you were kind of hand in glove with them. I had a guy on last season, James Hayhurst, runs a
Mhm.
thing called the Magic Source course. And I now ask what I call the Magic Source question because I
Yeah.
kind of love it and love the thinking. What do you think is that magic sauce between agency and client to get that? Because you must have seen other clients you worked with where maybe you didn't have that relationship. And you've probably seen that from all sorts of different angles. So, what is it? What is that magic sauce that makes that relationship between agency and client, client and agency work really, really well?
A real relationship. It is a relationship. It's not transactional. Um, and so it was every relationship needed the value, like respected and valued. I have to respect you, you have to value me, and vice versa. And that's what made it a real relationship. And you have to be intentional about maintaining that relationship, even if you hear things that you don't like, or we're not gonna get the brief right and we're gonna let you down, or time frames or any of those kinds of things. When you have an intentional relationship, a client can call you and go, I absolutely hate it. Can we go back to the beginning? Or a client can say, this is amazing. I now want you to do two more territories because, we took a shot, but actually now we want to put you on retainer. It's about those things, because when you have a real and intentional relationship, it's reflected when it most goes wrong. When it goes wrong and a client is calling you going, we fucked up, I need some help, or can I just ask you a question? And we're not jumping through hoops or three lines of reporting for you to go and do that. When someone can pick up the phone and go, actually, I just wanted to bounce this off you, but that they could do that to anyone, that they could do that not just to the CEO or a head of, they could do it to an account manager, or they could do it to the strategist, or they could do it to the CD to say, like, actually, let's have this conversation, or I'm really pleased about that. And it was never about hierarchy. So yeah, for me, the magic source is being intentional and building relationships that are ecosystem 360.
So, using that point then to segue into It Takes a Village. And do you take that forward with how you're trying to change Adland then? Is that all about building relationships with the people you're trying to influence, or is it about, and does that stop you from being able to create a ruckus if you need to be able to get that change making happening?
I in my grown and sexy era, as I call my 40s, I'm in my ruckus. Um, but that same ethos means that I have the grace to be in my ruckus, because I didn't, you know, I'm going to use a culture term, but you go into an African person's home, you take your shoes off, like you don't come with dirt. So I've come into the industry, but into somebody else's house, and actually, I'm here, and yes, I might have some disruptive things because I see a lot of stuff. But before I start throwing stuff out, I'm going to navigate my surroundings and understand where I'm at and build that relationship, so that good or bad, negative or positive feedback, it's coming from a place of respect and a place of value, and not disrespect or devaluing the conversation. And I think that has been the lifeblood of ITAV, because I didn't get anywhere on my own. Black women don't get anywhere on their own. And oftentimes, I always say, it's what we say at It Takes a Village is, we need, we don't have allies. I don't think like the word allies and think of them as our ambassadors, but they're called champions, because to be someone who is an ally to Black women, you have to be a champion. You have to understand that, what, sometimes you might die on the sword first. Look at how Black women are viewed in the world today. I don't need to explain it any further. So my greatest champions ordinarily are white men, but that's from a business perspective. where the majority of power exists are white men. And so, unless they were trying to sleep with me, it was that they saw that I was a great asset. They went, "Go on, do you," and it's been great. And that's been very much, a lot of where I've got to on the ladder in my career. I say my most violent are white women, and that's not to go, "Oh my God, white women are horrible." It's to understand the construct of power. In order for women to have power, they co-opted the behaviors of white men. So a lot of women who have come up in the ranks have co-opted those behaviors, and that has then been perpetuated. But my most harmful are black men and black women, because it's my own mirror image, and that's, I have caused harm to other black men, other black women, and vice versa, because this is all we know. So in that, for ITAV, it is about always remembering that part, always paying it forward, backwards, sidewards, admitting when made mistakes and vice versa. But it doesn't make any difference whether you are us where we're at or the industry, because we are not going to change this industry to be this beautiful thing that we all know it can be if we don't work together, if we don't do that hand in hand together. So yeah, practice what you preach, whether I was in your house, outside your house, or wherever. It's always going to be about respect and value.
There's so many really important things that you touched on during that, and hopefully we get a chance to unpick all
My
of them. Uh,
ADHD will do so much in such a short. I'm sorry.
so no, I love it. I love it. I want to go back to start with a line you mentioned almost as a throwaway comment. Um, to look at the state of the advertising industry, and I'll explain why. You just mentioned as a bit of a throwaway, unless they're trying to sleep with me, and then kind of bounced
Yeah.
into something else.
Mm-hmm.
I am aware of the history in the past of men in power utilizing that position in advertising agencies,
Yeah.
particularly, but across the marketing industry, to
Mm-hmm.
abusing that power, not utilizing that power, abusing
Mm-hmm.
that power, especially with younger women. I'm aware of that. I know it's a thing. What I was surprised about, given the fact it's 2020 fucking five right
Mm-hmm.
now, is just how prevalent that still is. Seemingly, there's a bit of like, oh, that died out in the 80s, right?
No,
It didn't, did it?
no, not at all. Because the industry, up until, let's be really honest, right? Up until 2020, vast majority of our industry was not reflective of the world that they would like to see outside. Let's be honest, of Black Square Summer and what that did, and it put everybody on their backside and made them look at the world in a completely different way than what they used to. And industry upon industry went, shit, how do I make my business more diverse? But they did it at a granular level instead of doing it at a strategic level and embed it from the root. So it's not sustainable. But when an industry and an agency doesn't look like you, then perhaps that point of difference, you're not then challenging that. It's just you're perpetuating the same behaviors. And so for decades, the same behaviors have been perpetuated because our industry has done a reflection of itself over and over and over again. And I'm not telling you anything that's not new or not on record. Like, we had a problem of where we recruit from, because we were just getting, you had to have this kind of degree or you had to have this kind of background. So you're also then going to have the same kind of behaviors that come from those kinds of people, because where they came from, oh yeah, it's okay. What happened is that we stopped talking about it out loud. When we stopped talking about it out loud, it then meant that it still then just happened in an insidious way. It's only when things are talked about out loud that actually that's where it starts to change. And I don't think that that's been consistent over I mean, especially in the last 5 years, of that we've been talking about a lot of problems, but this one was the one that constantly got pushed. Be silent, be still, don't mention it. But it has gone on for a very, very long time. And the only way the cycle is going to be broken is if we can, if we continue to talk about it out loud, because there is an old guard who don't want the world to change. There is an old guard who will still make comments about your appearance or the clothes that you're wearing, or will stand too close because they've been allowed to get away with it for a very, very long time. And nobody's called them on it. Or if they have, they've been silenced or they've been pushed to the side. So I think someone always has to go first. I think we have to keep continuing to talk about these things, talking about the really, really dark things. But I'm not going to lie and say, no, it's not a problem, because it is a very, very horrific problem that is perpetuated in some very, very big spaces.
Do you feel like you're pushing water up the biggest hill? Not just a big hill because you're trying to support women
Mm,
getting into positions of
mm,
power. Not just a big hill because you're trying to support black people getting into a position of
mm,
power. You're trying to support black women getting into a space that has never really welcomed them before.
mhm.
Does it just feel? I know this sounds like the most negative way I could have framed that question,
No, it's a real
but
question.
is that how it feels?
It's exhausting. It's exhausting, but I have to keep reminding myself, one, this isn't about me, there's no I, it's a we. Two, it's not about the sum of my parts or the sum of our parts. That's the nuance. This is about strategy. And this is about training and education. For me, that's the root. But I'm gonna puff my chest for a second. What I have achieved, how I have changed and transformed businesses, especially over the last 10 years, has got nothing to do with color of my skin. It's my skill set. The color of my skin and my gender sometimes stop you from being able to identify my skill set. So ultimately, what we're trying to do is that part. I want you to understand the untapped strategic value of having black women in your business. Not because, oh my God, woe is us, it's a black woman. It's because what you're going to get from a skill base from a black woman, I can't even define it for you. We really just are that ish from the black women that are also mothers, that are carers, that all the things that I said to you before. Like, if I look at the work that we achieved at Lucky's, the things that I did at my G work, the things that I've done in retail, I was chatting to a friend and I said, in the last 10 years, regardless of the circumstances of why I left a role, every company that I've worked for, I have left better than when I joined. I've left further ahead than when I joined. And in fact, most of those businesses are now household names in all the industries that I worked in. And I played my part in doing that alongside some incredible people. That's what we're doing. What we're doing is actually going, we're going to shine a spotlight on some incredible talent that you can't reach, that you can't access, and that you can't keep safe. You might be able to bring in, but you can't retain. And you have to understand how to do that. We'll help you apply the nuance, just like we've done that for so many other communities, LGBT, young people. We did it with apprenticeships. We didn't always get it right for Black women. So part of our mission is to help do that. We're not the only voice, but we're one of those that are trying to make a difference to that. And yeah, it's not going to be easy, but the best lesson that I have, it goes to that stubborn part, is my dad. I started playing black tax about 7, 8. And my dad just had a really real conversation with me, and he said, Chloe, you're black and you're female, so it's going to be harder for you than it is for a lot of other people. So I don't want you to grow up with a chip on your shoulder, like you can do anything. There's nothing that you can't do unless you try and you put in the work. And that's been my life mantra my whole life. Where I come unstuck is when people will try to remind me that I don't fit and that I don't belong. But I am one of one. I'm not supposed to fit. I don't want to fit. I'm quite happy as I am. And it took me a long time to love that about myself. I am my own black, gorgeous unicorn. And if you don't like that, that's on you. But I'm going to go where I'm respected and I'm valued, and I'm going to do exactly the same. And I think it's that we have the opportunity to be able to do that. And if I wasn't black, and if I wasn't a woman, and I was perhaps a white man, you would just go, "Oh my God, isn't he pioneering? Isn't that amazing? Like, isn't that great?" So I'm not any different to anybody else. I just need to help educate you that this isn't arrogance. This is facts. Done the work, can back it up, and the only way that you will be able to acknowledge that is that if you understand that, and it's not just my face. It's incredible women that I know that maybe some people don't know because they don't take the time or they don't respect and value the skill sets of those women. Madeleine McQueen being one of, the greatest that I know from a marketing advertising perspective. Lauren, um, Lauren at IPG and at Kinesso, like there are just some incredible black women who have been doing the damn thing for a very, very long time. Ellie Edward Scott, Adele, Elizabeth Onyegba, Colette Phillip, like so many women, but most people have no idea who they are. Not because they haven't existed, but we just don't know how to look.
Well, hopefully, long-time listeners of the strategy sessions will recognise at least Colette Phillips'
Colette,
name. Colette
yeah.
was on and did a tremendous
Oh my
episode.
god, I love
Challenge
her.
me
She
if it
challenges
didn't
all
make
of
anyone
us.
else think differently.
She challenges
Challenge
all of
me.
us. She challenges all of us, and we ADHD to ADHD. We have to restrict our calls because we're like, oh, we're just going to do a quick check-in. 3.5 hours later, I'm like, Colette, we're still on the phone. We're like, I'm going now. Colette, we're still on the phone.
It's
So
like
yeah,
put a timer on, and when it goes bing, we've got to just hang up. That's it, right?
but to your point, Colette and Brand by Me were the first business that invested in It Takes a Village Collective. She just said, I see you, I see what you're trying to build. Please take my money. It's that. It's about knowing that we're out there, we exist, but also supporting each other.
So you talked about champions, you talked about support. What could someone take away from this if they want to either get in touch or if they want to help, if they want to be part of what you're trying to achieve? What sort of support and what sort of champions do you need right now?
We need a lot of things. I think, like everyone, we need, investment. But for me, it's not about investment for money's sake. It's about those who really want to support the talent that exists within, our community, being able to access that, better that, but also to learn and understand and, really, really try to educate. We've got some really, really great things coming up. We've been an inclusion partner with Lions for 3 years now, so we'll be working with them for See It Be It, and we'll keep your eyes peeled. You'll see some stuff in November, and we're going to navigate where we're held and welcomed this year. Like I said, going back to that Black History Month point of I'm not just doing things for Black people's sake. I'm doing things because they're intentional and it is what our community means. So you might not see us as much outside this year, not because I don't want us to come together, but I really want us to be strategic and intentional about where we do the work and who we do the work with. We're in partnership with um, Media Leader and the Future of Events. We're a partner of Campaign and Haymarket and the team. Like I said, we're an inclusion partner of Cannes Lions and the Festival of Media. You'll see us throughout the industry. We're not going to go away, but we're going to be very, very smart and intentional about that work that we do. You may see us at Cannes this year. We haven't quite worked that out, but wherever we go, we always want to pay it forward. We worked together with Milk Honey Bees this summer and set them a creative challenge. They're with us for 5 days. They're an incredible organisation that's bringing up young Black girls to know that they can be anyone that want to be. And we did that together with the likes of TikTok and Spotify. For us, that's the work that we're going to continue to do. So if you want to be a part of that, if you want to tap into our talent pool, if you want to lend your resource, then by all means, you're all welcome to kind of join that charge.
Excellent. And Chloe's details are in the show notes if you want to reach out and get in touch with Chloe that way. So before we wrap up, Chloe, I've got to ask you just the one last question, which feels like a bit of a weird change of gear compared to where we've been. But is there a resource, a book, a podcast, a report, something that you think people should check out? Maybe it helps make them think differently. Maybe it's just that someone once said Ottolenghi's cookbook, which was a bit of that was a hell of a
Okay.
gear change.
Okay.
But it could be anything, just
Yeah,
anything that you think people should check out.
Do you know what? I've worked with them, and I've worked with them for the last 4 or 5 years. So I can make this shift. It has nothing to do with where I am with them now, but the work that the Unstereotype Alliance has been doing, and just in particular, I was part of the Conversations for Change series that they did together with Channel 4. It was 5 different themes, 5 conversations. much of those conversations are as relevant today as they were back then. The likes of Trevor and Rania Robinson from Quiet Storm was on it, Lydia Amoa. They're just, yeah, it was, the work that they're doing, the fact that they're standing on business, they've done the creative bravery backlash report, and the latest inclusion equals income. That's the part where someone just needs to know that it's okay. Like, if I'm not going to get cancelled if I do this, but how do I weather the storm when stuff starts coming my way? Because stuff is going to keep coming our way this year. It's going to get worse before it gets better. So I think that platform, that resource, go back, have a look at some of the things that they did in the past. They're still just great tools that we can use today. And then just look at what that means in terms of results. Have a look at, they surveyed 380 businesses and all those businesses are thriving. When you do it in community, you're never going to lose.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Chloë Davies, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Andy.